And we're live. How's it going, buddy? It's been a while.
Right. Yeah, it's been a while. Last time was like Value Bitcoin conference, right?
Yeah. When was that? May? June?
May, I believe.
Okay. And I'll
just retweet this.
I was way too long getting my hands on your book, and that's partially my fault and partially Amazon's fault because everything has gone to shit here in Canada since COVID with Amazon, especially where I'm living in Newfoundland. But I finally got it. Got a copy right here. Read it a week or two ago, and I thought it was time to have you back on for a general discussion and talk about the book. So before we get into that, how's life, man? You're looking pretty. You're looking like you're living pretty large over there. A nice setup in the sun. You got the forest behind you. Life looks good.
Yeah. And I showed you my pet pig.
The party pig.
Let's show everyone else this. I got this for my 40th birthday. It's right up there.
Horrible OPSEC, Knut. Everyone's gonna know which house is yours.
I've revealed my pig. Yeah, horrible.
Where does he live? The one with the big pig on the roof? Yeah, that's Knut.
Or is it? Yeah.
So life is good?
Life is really good. I just got back from work. The forest here behind me is where there's a little path up to a graveyard here, and then there's a circular sort of jogging route there.
Nice.
So
what have you been up to this summer? You're not writing right now, are you?
Sorry?
You're not writing another book right now, are you?
No. I've been Bitcoin-wise. I've been writing a couple of articles for Hodlonauts magazine, Hodlonauts and Katya's Citadel 21.
Yeah, I've seen that. It's awesome.
It is awesome. It's such a funny side project.
Yeah.
For everyone in this, I guess.
There's so many great projects like that popping off now. It's just so great to see. So much expression, I guess, is the broader term to use to describe this, whether it's like, because we really had like a boon in books and articles and stuff over the last 2 years. And now we're getting all this like other forms of creativity, like comic books and cultural zines and, like lots of memeing going on. Like 21ism is a group of guys out of the UK, I believe, that's doing a lot of stuff. I mean, it's like an explosion of creativity centered around Bitcoin. I love it.
Yeah, really. It's so fun to follow it all and like be a part of.
So when this came out, the new book?
I guess it was published May or early June, maybe.
Right.
So it got a bit of attention in the beginning, since a sentence was censored. Maybe you heard of that.
I did hear about it. Tell me again what the sentence was.
It was just in the about section of the book. I self-publish these things through Amazon, so I'm using their do-it-yourself things there, and just a hobby thing. So so I wrote like written just a couple of months before the Corona crisis hit us. The ideas in this book are more important now than ever. Something like that. That was the sentence, and that got stuck in Amazon's surveillance filters.
Just saying that because of the coronavirus crisis, this book is more important than ever. That's it. That got censored, and like we're not going to publish anything except what the government tells us to publish. But like, what even could be the possible rule around that? Like, you're not allowed to mention the word. Is that the censorship? Because like, you're not even being critical. You're not suggesting there's any kind of conspiracy or anything like that. You're just saying
no. I think
it's more important now.
I think they had a like. They got a set of rules from somewhere, and then they made the algorithm like waterproof to not let anything through, in order to imagine you don't really know what the rules are, or you don't know what they will be in the next week or so, because everything happens so fast with the crisis, right? So they had to adapt the algorithm to like filter out anything that had to do with writings about the virus that could be like
inflammatory.
Yeah, and I guess maybe the word Bitcoin and the word COVID in the same sentence triggered it, or I don't really know, but this is just speculation. But I guess if I ran a big service like that for self-published materials, I would, and I was facing like huge fines for breaking the rules or letting anything through. I would probably do the same thing, and this is why we need decentralized solutions and true free speech, which includes money in my mind. We don't really have free speech as long as we don't have free speech in money, because I believe money is speech.
And you touched on that in the book, but I want to hold you back on that one yet, because there's a bunch of these kind of core concepts I'm going to bring up from the book. But just before we do that, back to the Amazon publishing process, because I think, I mean, whatever criticisms you might have about Amazon, right? The fact is that it enables self-publishing basically. And I think there's so many people out there in the Bitcoin space that probably would like to avail of this type of a service. Now, whether it's done through Amazon or elsewhere, I don't know what the trade-offs are and what the best way to do it is. But can you just like detail what the process was like for you, so that like anybody who's an aspiring writer out there or has some ideas that they might want to share can kind of get some insight into how easy or difficult it is to do it?
Well, it's pretty easy. You download a template for like what size of book you want, and just write the book in that format. And you just have to make sure you proofread it and edit it meticulously, because otherwise you'll like I published one book at first with the articles I'd written for between 17 and 18, and I wasn't really happy with that afterwards. So that's why I wrote Sovereignty Through Mathematics, to have a proper Bitcoin book attached to my name instead of just a collection of articles.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized in the process, like this is a trial and error thing for me, as I guess it is for every writer. And I just read, or listened to rather, Stephen King's On Writing book, which I found some of it to be good. I mean, the first half of it was pretty boring because it was Stephen King's upbringing, basically. And I mean, I guess a writer's life isn't that exhilarating to read about. But then he had some good tips on how to write fiction, because I'm thinking of writing fiction, but can't get an idea good enough to like put my mind to do that. So right now I'm focused on writing articles instead, whenever creativity comes to me. But it was the same thing with the other two books. Like, I hadn't written for almost a year when I wrote Independence Reimagined, and then it all started flooding out of me again. So grateful for that.
I noticed a fairly, like, I want to get your take on writing the two books, Sovereignty Through Mathematics and Independence Reimagined, right? Because Independence Reimagined seemed more like, not stream of consciousness, but you tackled like a lot of like big ideas,
Yeah.
but like didn't go super deep on each one of them. You kind of like, kind of did a summary of a lot of big ideas, where Sovereignty Through Mathematics seemed to be more like focused in on particular aspects. Was that intentional? And like, and actually, I guess the second part of that question is, why write? Like, what was the motivation behind this one? Like, what was it in your mind that just you decided you had to get it out?
Yeah, really good questions. I guess the second one was more stream of consciousness, because the thing was, since the first one became sort of a success story, I thought if I want to like I want to contribute more and do more stuff in Bitcoin, because I really enjoy, like, talking to you, for instance. I mean, we would never have talked if I hadn't written the book, the first one.
Right.
And like, the more quality content I can produce, the more. I mean, it is a meritocracy, sort of, and like, of course, that's why we do what we do. That's why we have our terrible OPSEC and everything, because we sort of want to make a name for ourselves in this space, I guess, and like share. We talked about this at the Value of Bitcoin conference, I think, but we had a slight different view on it. I mean, I'm not doing it for fortune and fame, but like, getting attention for something sort of inspires you to do more of that thing. Of course, I wouldn't deny that either. Like, if people appreciate what I do, I can produce more of it. Like, and so.
Well, there's that side of it. There's that side of it. But I think, and this might be what we talked about back then, and you actually addressed it in the book as well, and I'll get to that. But I think one of the beneficial aspects of, like, kind of formally expressing yourself, whether it's through books, articles, podcasts, whatever, is like, you've got all these thoughts constantly spinning in your mind, and they're pretty untested. Like, you contemplate them and you maybe try to refine them internally, but that's a very kind of like soft process of refinement. But if you express them outwardly, like you put them out there, then that kind of accelerates your journey of understanding things better. It puts your ideas to the fire, and then you kind of get in this snowball where you have to keep refining, because now it's all out there, right? And I think that's one of the beneficial aspects.
And there's some of the ideas in the book are really a lot like that, because there are ideas which I don't really know how to express them if I don't like try to explain them to myself first. And in order to do that, I have to write about them, and I have to be quite, like, I have to use a language that anyone could understand. Those are ideas like what a deflationary asset actually does to everything else. Like, one of the ideas in the book is that right now money is the cheapest thing there is to produce in the world. There's nothing that is as cheap to produce as new money, because all you have to do is click a button on a computer. And what that does, if you like, boil everything, how the world works down to its simplest parts, it's like, money is cheap to produce, and therefore the prices of everything else go up over time. But on the other hand, if money was the absolutely most expensive thing to produce there was, the prices of everything else would fall over time. And I can't really get this thought out of my head, because it's so weird when you start thinking about it, like that nothing. I mean, an idea would have to be so superb to actually beat Bitcoin in the long run, that like only the most worth idea, the ideas, only the best ideas would be worth sacrificing your Bitcoin for. And like I said, it's hard to explain just talking about it, but I hope I can manage to explain myself in the book a bit better.
Well, let's hang out there for a second for two reasons, because it's relevant to the previous conversation. I'm just going to read this passage, but this is something that I guess promote all the time when people, there's too many podcasts, too many books, too many articles, too many whatever. I just think you refine your idea and you refine yourself, and then you express it, and then you repeat. And that's how you grow. That's how you contribute value, all that stuff. And in the book, you said, after having discovered Bitcoin, and in doing so, also having discovered new ways to think about scarcity and time, I've decided to not hold my brain back any longer, but to put my thoughts out there where they are at least where they at least might ignite a spark in someone else's mind. Standing on the shoulders of true giants, here's my take. So I love that part because it's like an invitation to people to say, like, yes, of course, everyone's insecure that they might be wrong or they might be missing something or whatever. But the only way you're really going to refine it is to think about it, put it out there. And if someone shits on it, then you benefit because you learn. And if someone doesn't shit on it, it's actually a genuine, good, unique thought, then yeah, sure, you get some praise or you get some credibility or whatever. And just keep fucking doing that.
Just hearing you reading that passage and like it makes it all worth it. Because I know someone is listening to me, and this is just exhilarating to hear that people are reading the stuff and like.
Well, dude, it's you know what? It's amazing. Like, and I've been doing these Bitcoiners in the Wild podcasts where I just like send out on Twitter who wants to jump on a conversation. Not known Bitcoiners, and it's so common that I hear people tell me that as a result of getting involved in Bitcoin and kind of discovering Bitcoin Twitter and seeing that there's a community of sharing ideas and testing ideas and this kind of stuff, they've kind of overcome the hurdle that they experienced early in their life of not having the confidence to express, an element of who they are or their intellectual capacity or whatever. And they've just decided, no, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it, whatever it might be. And they do it and they love it. They're realizing they have a voice and their voice has value, and that's how they learn. And that's how, and they can inspire other people to do the same and learn.
It's beautiful, and you want your ideas to be debunked, and you want people to be slightly upset at times and stuff. All that plays in, like a lot of inspiration for like putting my thoughts out there is from Taleb and the what's it called? Not the Black Swan, but the other one, Skin in the Game, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And the concept of skin in the game really, like, I didn't like the book the first time I read it, but then it stuck with me. There's something like some parts of skin in the game, like I couldn't get the thoughts out of my head. And because I've been having these conversations with my brothers, like I have a lot of conversations about deep things with my brothers, as I'm sure many other people have as well. But one of those things is like there's I wouldn't call it OPSEC, but like we call it keeping the stealth, and like you shouldn't expose yourself too much and blah 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 and all of this. But then again, that's the flip side of that coin is like. But you need skin in the game, and you need to try stuff in order to excel, and in order to get better at, like, podcasting, for instance, and interviews like this, talking about a relatively complicated subject, and for me in another language than my mother's tongue, and like improvising like this. I know I get stuck from time to time, and like, but it is this helps me get better at stuff, and that's what it's all about. And Skin in the Game taught me that to a large extent. Like if I don't put my ass on the line, I will never. If I never have anything to lose, I will never gain anything either. Like risk and reward, you have to balance out the two, and like
totally. And there's always trade-offs, right? And you just gotta. I think that's part of knowing who you are, like what you're about. So like I totally respect everyone who's playing a hardcore OPSEC game, right?
Sorry, forgot to turn off my phone.
How dare you, Knut?
Yeah, I'll put it off. Flight mode.
I respect people who do hardcore OPSEC, but I just know like who I am and what I'm about. I could never have kept all this bottled up, so I just had to accept the trade-off that it meant for me.
Yeah, and there are downsides to that trade-off. That, like all trade-offs, there are upsides and downsides. But like that's what a trade-off is. But I like all the experiences and everyone I've met and all the contacts I've made, because all the connections I've made with the people, because I said, screw OPSEC, I'm going to do this and I'm going to attach my name to it. It's all worth it, man. Right
Yeah.
now, at least. And
Yeah,
like,
well, exactly. I agree with you. We'll see how things play out, but
yeah, and I'm 44 in a couple of months. I have nothing to lose, or I have a shit ton to lose. But anyway, uh, but like, I'm not afraid of embarrassing myself publicly by expressing my thoughts and feelings on certain things.
yeah.
I like being afraid of being politically incorrect, or like on the wrong side of an argument, or like, screw that.
Totally.
It's too late for that anyway.
And man, as I don't have to tell you, but you know, in today's society, so many people censor themselves because they're afraid of the social or financial or job related, career related repercussions of speaking their
Exactly.
mind on some of the, and on most of the time, these are on things that are like, you know, the most obvious things a person could ever say, but they're
Yeah.
so afraid of being canceled in whatever capacity that means
Yeah,
that they
rightfully
self-censor.
so, unfortunately,
Yeah, I
because they
know.
do get canceled and they do get fired, and there's a risk to it, a very real risk. Just look at the virtue signaling on LinkedIn, for instance. It's all over the
I
place.
rarely go there.
Yeah, me neither, but I need to in my line of work. So
Right.
like, but it's still, it makes me sick to see people like promote stuff just in order to like promote themselves as good people.
Yeah.
And like and I believe on a personal level that intellectual honesty that's where I want to be, and that's what I want to attach my name to. I want to be intellectually honest, and I don't want to just put an opinion out there without having read up on it or thought it through. But I do want to do that, and I do want to like base my theories and opinions on stuff that I actually thought long and deep and hard about.
Yeah.
And that's why I write these books, and that's why I'm doing this thing now.
Yeah, I think it's paramount, intellectual honesty. And you think of the flip side, you know, that you think of it, either the act of omission, so kind of muzzling yourself, you know, censoring yourself, and the act of actively engaging in falsehoods, let's say, or at least opinions and perspectives that have not been deeply considered. Then you know, and this goes into the kind of the power of speech, but you're contributing to the creation of a delusion. And
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a horrible thing, because you don't want to live in a false reality. We want to live in the best
No, exactly.
approximation of the truth that we can.
And if I'm ever going to be proud of anything that I do, it better be something that I'm genuinely proud of, instead of something that I'm just like proud of by proxy, or how it's like, if I'm doing something for someone else, or like someone else's idea, or promoting something in my like living another person's dream. That's not where it's at. Excuse me.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, I think about it sometimes. I think we all have moments, or have had moments, where we envy other people, right? So let's just take the quintessential, like the billionaire who's got the plane and the big house and the yacht and all that kind of stuff. And that's an easy person to envy. But I find myself envying nobody more than the people that I see that are the most free, right? The like the uncancelable, the people that are genuinely themselves all the time, no matter what, because that's the ultimate freedom, right? Not
Yeah,
not
but
the fact that you
that's
have a
you.
fucking yacht. What?
That's you.
Well, I'm
When I
trying.
see your little videos on Twitter, like kayaking, or like your perfect Christmas snow landscape there, and like swimming in some majestic Canadian landscape. I mean, You seem like a free guy.
Well, that's what I'm going for, but that's still only part of it, right? Like being in a beautiful, pristine landscape, that's part of it, and feeling comfortable there and enjoying that. But like the people that have just kind of drilled down on who they are and are free to express that no matter what and no matter where, those are the people that I envy. And I think a lot of people in this space envy those types of people too. And that's why we're so adamant and interested in freedom in all of its different capacities and domains.
Yeah. I remember like the first years in Bitcoin for me, I watched a lot of Andreas Antonopoulos, as everyone did. And like I found his life story to be almost more interesting than the stuff he said about Bitcoin. Like that he could like take this new concept that wasn't his, that was open source and just out there, and he did his own thing with it, and he traveled the world and like lectured to people about it, and like didn't have a home at the time. I mean, he told this story on a couple of podcasts, and he was just flying around. I don't know what he's doing now, or if he still lives like that.
I think he does.
Yeah, probably. But like, he seemed like a really free guy that could do like whatever he wanted just by talking about this thing and doing this. And of course, there was that was inspirational to me, just that kind of lifestyle. But I have a family and things to take care of, so it's like it's not possible to do it in the same way as he's doing it. But I can still reach for those same like the same goals, or like same values. I value time that I decide over. Like if someone else is dictating what I'm doing, like I try to maximize the time that I actually own, because time is like the only thing you can own, and every tool ever created by man is there for one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to save us time. And that's a deep insight in that. Like everything we have is we created it in order to someone created it in order to save time doing something. And that's why it's so dangerous to like. It's very easy to forget that when you get lost in the push notifications on your phone, or mowing the lawn, because like the lawnmower saves you time, but it's the lawn doesn't. Like that's not a tool, if you know what I mean. Like we create tools to save us time, but then we invent new problems which we need new tools to solve.
Yeah. So we always, our upgrades always open up the door for more upgrades, right?
Yeah.
I guess, why do you think that is? Why do we always want more time? Is it just a manifestation of our finite lives?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think it's a very natural and a very healthy way to look at things. Like if you free up time, you can help more people. Like, and you can live a more fulfilling life if you can decide over your own time. You can have a much more purposeful life, even if that purpose is just to eat well and drink well with your friends every night. That's perfectly fine. Like, but you need time in order to get to do that. You need to own your time.
Yeah. Let's hang out here for a sec, because I think that part of the equation is obvious, right? Like we're finite beings. We want to maximize the amount of time that we have. And so anything that saves us time allows us to bank more time, allows us, to spend our time better than we're interested in. And that's kind of like a part of our nature. But when you were saying that, it made me think of, the proponents of like a UBI, where they say, well, if everyone just has enough for the essentials, then it will unleash this like creative explosion. And I usually push back on that assumption, because I think like having the time is definitely one thing. It's a requisite for determining what you want to express and do. But meaning is such an important variable in that equation. And like, it could be a variety of things. It could be you're raising your children. It could be engaging in something that improves your life or the world. But you've got to have that thing that focuses the spending of your time almost. What are your thoughts on
UBI, let's get this thing straight. It's communism in disguise. It's all that it is. Like, and if you read up on Austrian economics, you'll know you can see why it will never work, because like you cannot create value by handing out coupons to people that you've printed out of thin air. They add nothing of value to a society. In order to add value to society, people need an incentive to do stuff, to do valuable stuff with their time. And like the UBI is the opposite of that. It takes away the incentive people have to learn from their mistakes. And like if you're engaged in an activity, like I need a good example here. Like say that you instead of you could either be a fisherman or work for a as a puppeteer. And if you're a fisherman, you catch fish, right? And you can sell them to people. If you're a puppeteer, you need an audience and you need to sell tickets to them. But all of a sudden, the government comes along and gives you UBI, so you don't need an audience any longer. You can do the puppeteering at your home, and you can do it in whatever way you want without having to satisfy a customer anywhere. That means that all the fishermen could potentially just sit inside and have a big wank and produce nothing of value to anyone every day. And like, but this is so basic that like, if you have nothing to lose from being unproductive, you will be more unproductive, and society on the whole will be more unproductive. And why capitalism and free markets get blamed all the time is because we have unsound money and inflationary currencies, because it makes people make bad short-term investments because they have a too short time horizon, and they make bad investment upon bad investment, and there are misallocated resources everywhere. And we're just unaware of how much better everything could be if we had a sound money system.
And it makes attempting to corrupt the system or co-opt it a paying proposition, right? It creates that lever of power and influence that you can
and it's
try to
so
co-opt
skewed
beyond market value, beyond market dominance.
Yes, and if you look upon like America in up until especially 71, but even before that, like you had almost no taxes, and every graph you could see was going upwards. But of course, there was still poverty and still misery here and there. But I would argue you still have the same problems. It's just like it's harder to get anywhere in your society now, because you like the burden of the of taxation, and when I say taxation, I count inflation as taxation. It's really high, and it's even worse over here, of course. But that's how it is. If you look back in time, like the most productive periods in human history have been in areas and through eras where people were on a more sound money type system, or like where like the last 20 years, like for South Korea and places in China where they opened up for these mechanisms to work in, like, of course they're sort of fake free markets, but based on the same principles. And like Moore's law played into this a lot as well, I guess, because after we got computers, everything got exponential. So it seems like we're moving fast forwards, but we could be moving a lot faster if we were on a sound money standard.
I totally agree with that. And I'll take a line from the book that touches this. And it says, anything but personal responsibility for your actions is less effective and more costly for a society in the long run. And of course, responsibility for putting a roof over your head, deriving income, and supporting yourself is definitely among those. And actually, to give you an example, what's happening here now is because in Canada, the government is paying those who were made unemployed by the COVID, they're giving them $2,000 a month. And what that's done in the context of an already very controlled system. So for example, minimum wage is a price control on labor. And I think it's ultimately destructive to full employment and the productivity of the economy in general. Anyways, that's kind of another issue. But what it's done is that now when jobs are coming back online, when restaurants and other minimum wage positions want to hire people, those people make the economic calculation. Well, I could make $3,000 to $4,000 a month by going back to work, or I could stay at home and do nothing and get $2,000. And I think the economists, when they do these policies, think, well, of course, everyone's going to choose the $4,000 over the $2,000, but that's not the case. That's not the case.
Yeah, minimum wage is even easier to debunk than UBI, because UBI seems like such an altruistic idea, like give everyone money. But minimum wage, like if you go into McDonald's anywhere in the world right now, how do you order your food? Is there a waiter? It's a screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that screen cost McDonald's something, and it cost them less than it costed them to hire a waiter. So, and we can't stop that. Like the technological evolution will continue, regardless of what we think about it. There's nothing wrong in that. Like I said before, all tools are there to save us time. And like I think people really, they don't get how easy their lives could be if they were on a sound money standard and just got their hands on just a small stash of money, sound money, Bitcoin.
Or just worked in an economy on a sound money standard. I mean, that would take care of reduce the intervention.
Yeah, because you wouldn't have to work as much.
Right.
It's the system we're under now that makes us work overtime and like work from 8 to 5 every single day, and weekends as well. Yeah. Everything is up and running at all times, and we could be a lot more lazy on a sound money standard, like because you could work like you could work really hard for a month or so and take the rest of the year off. Like if we were in a sound money standard and there was a global free market, that would allocate so much capital goods in the right positions instead of the wrong positions all over the world, so that everything would work out so much smoother for everyone. So like people are afraid that if they don't get the free money, they won't be able to afford anything. But that's just because prices go up. I mean, everyone is pissed at Amazon because they pay so low wages and they roboticize everything. But everyone uses Amazon because it's cheaper than everywhere else. Like, we like falling prices. That's not bad for poor people. That's good for poor people. Mm-hmm. Falling prices is more important than higher wages in that sense.
Yeah,
the prices of stuff.
If somebody makes their own independent economic calculation that they're willing to take a wage for their time, they're willing to take $15 an hour for their time because that's maybe the best option that's available to them, why should anybody other than that person and the person offering the job have any input on that decision? It's outrageous.
No, and that's the thing. Now we're entering a whole different rabbit hole here. Because
okay, wait.
This is all right.
Put a pin in that. So remember the point you want to make now.
Yeah.
I want to hear it.
Yeah, we're talking about the book. The thing is, my head is so full of stuff, but I really like to talk about the book because I haven't talked about this book nearly enough. So I'm really glad you read it, John, and that you want to talk about it.
I've got all sorts of underlines here, but I just want to read one of these underlines. So remember what you were just about to say. But I was at a campfire last night, and the the economic and financial situation in Canada and the respective provinces, and the province that I'm in is incredibly dire as a result of not just, of course, the crisis, but the crisis has layered on, 10 to 15x more debt. The deficit is 10 to 15x more time. The Bank of Canada's balance sheet is 5x what it was. All the provinces are horribly indebted. And so, people are sitting around, and most people have no understanding of sound money and how it could play here, but they are starting to think like, what the hell is going to happen? Like, how are we going to get out of this? And typically the response is, if you're in a, you're talking about provincial problems, well, we're going to have to get help from the federal government. But then you say, well, the federal government can't do much to help. And to me, it's interesting to see the kind of, we're not at least the conversations I'm a part of is not at the shift yet of kind of moving away from thinking the government's going to solve all problems. That's a very much ingrained mentality in Canada and probably in Sweden as well. But
tell me about it.
we are moving to a stage where people are at least starting to question the capacity of the government's ability to provide solutions, because they're in such dire financial circumstances. And I'll read this passage from the book, and you say, the creepy thing about letting a third party decide what rules apply at what point in time and to whom is that the system might function perfectly fine until the day it suddenly doesn't. Now, you can apply that paragraph to many different things, but I think it's apt in terms of the government, applying it to the government, because a lot of people think it's kind of this endless piggy bank of problem solving, money, and you can address all these different things. And I would argue that it doesn't work perfectly fine, but most people's perception is that it works well enough. Yep. But I think we're approaching an era where in many different places around the world, it could start suddenly not working very well.
Yeah.
And
look at Turkey, for instance. Like, we used to go to on vacation in Turkey like 15 years ago, or even 10 years ago, and it was a completely different place than what it is now. And things can go south really fast. And they're hyperinflating now, and it's horrible. And of course, Lebanon and Venezuela and Zimbabwe and all these places, like, I don't believe the populations of those places expected everything to go so wrong as they did.
Yeah.
Maybe they thought the system was corrupt and they could do nothing about it, but they were still like living day to day. But I bet it's really hard to imagine how shitty stuff can get.
Yeah. So, and in Western developed economies, we generally think we're immune to that, even though, and most people aren't familiar with like the early history of a couple hundred years ago in your France and Germany and stuff. You just think, it doesn't happen here. It happens over there. It doesn't happen here.
Exactly. Yeah, but it's the same thing over and over again. That's a cycle thing.
Yeah.
And one of the themes I had in mind when writing the book, and I wrote the last chapter. The last chapter I wrote was the one about how collectivists win, the third chapter, because I've been thinking about this a lot. I'm very interested in what different societal systems lead to in the long run, and why collectivists win is about what happens when, like, when you draw the entire graph, what happens in the end of democracy? Well, how do democracies fail? Because I believe they eventually do. And like, social media has put that process on steroids, so I think will play out much faster than it otherwise might have, and democracies will fail faster than we thought they could. Just look at, I mean, in the United States now, you can choose between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. What does that say about democracy? Those are the two choices you have for the supposedly most powerful position on the planet. A rambling senile idiot and a rambling narcissistic monster. Like, it's completely mad, isn't it?
It is,
I mean, I have absolutely no nothing good to say about either candidate, really. I think it's completely bonkers that you have to choose between those two. However, how did we end up there? And I try to like reverse engineer that in that chapter. Like, for a person, the basic thesis that for a person who cares more about tribalism and fitting in with what their friends say and their friends' opinion, instead of like people, or in other words, people that are afraid of intellectual honesty and like sticking out, having another opinion than the rest of the flock, they form groups more easily. They form larger groups more easily by the very nature of how our minds work. Some of us are more flock oriented and some of us are more individualistic. And I guess that's why I really love the Bitcoin community, because we're a flock of individualists. And that exists like nowhere else. there's never been a community like that, like truly free thinking individualists forming a group together. That's unheard of, sort of. Don't you agree?
At least on this scale, for sure.
Yeah, at least on this scale and at this speed in which we have these conversations, how fast these memes evolve and everything. There's never a dull day in Bitcoin, right?
You know, I was thinking about it recently, and you know, The Sovereign Individual is a great book in addressing the kind of what happens socially in the latter stages of this kind of evolving change in the logic of violence and how technological innovation influences the logic of violence. And that's why it was so prescient in articulating what we should expect to see in the first couple decades of the new millennium. And it was really spot on in a lot of places.
Yeah. I really appreciate the book club episodes. I read both the books, so it was really, really fun to hear a discussion about them. And I was like, I should have been in this discussion.
Well, you have to join. You have to join one in the future. We're gonna.
Yeah, let me join the human action one.
Oh Jesus! I don't know when we're gonna do that one. But
marathon episode.
We'll get you in on it. But I was thinking, you know, the part of the explanation for what we're seeing today, and I say part because there's obviously many variables, but it kind of seems as if the fundamental organizing mechanism for human economic and therefore social interaction, for the thing that sets the rules of society, as it were, and I would say that's the money largely. If that loses its capacity to do that, right? So if it becomes more abused, if it becomes more co-opted, if it becomes more corrupted, then the kind of the cohesion that generates typically when it's as it should be has to move to the social layer even more and even more and even more. And so and what I think the reason why this PC culture, this don't upset the apple cart, this don't insult, this no hate speech, this is all a manifestation of like a mechanism that really shouldn't be responsible for cohesion. The cohesion should be at the base layer of society, again in the money, but because the money is failing, that cohesion is being moved up to the social layer. And that's why it's one causing so much, like it's almost like people are afraid not to agree with one another, but and there's so much like kind of softness in the society. But at the flip side of that, because it's such a important and sometimes contentious thing, you get this balkanization of kind of social groups, because they're kind of fighting for the right to be the dominant narrative in society, because and the dominant narrative is that cohesion. And so it's interesting to look at it in those terms, that as the money fails, the attempt for cohesion will go up to the social layer, but that is not where it should be, because that's the place where it's most fragile.
No. And I recently watched the what's it called, that hippie university in Seattle, where Brett Weinstein got expelled from. Evergreen, exactly. There was a documentary about that and about the incident there, and it's like jaw-dropping, because everyone in that place is they're fighting a social battle on like about totally irrelevant stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And no one is like being productive in the correct, or like contributing anything to anyone else. Excuse me for a moment.
Sure.
Okay. Oh, hey. Sorry about that. And how weird that place had, how far that thing went on. They like, when there's no one is incentivized to like sort things out, or like or say hang on a minute, or wait, but why, or something like that. When no one is incentivized to like deviate from the flock, so to speak. How completely disastrous that can be. And it's sort of like Nazi Germany, a miniature version of it, because that was exactly the same thing. It's just flock mentality. That's what it is. And it's so scary, because most humans are more concerned with like sticking to whatever lie they've been told is the truth, like, and clinging on to that.
Yeah, well, here's a great quote from the book that addresses precisely this. And it says, diversity is a term commonly used to describe everything but what truly needs to be diverse in a society, namely people's opinions. And that's what, that's what we're seeing. And there is a big corollary to Nazi Germany, because there's many elements involved again, of course, but the kind of condemnation of someone because of their ideas was represented there, and it's represented at the Evergreen thing, and it's represented all over the media and all over the place in the Western world today. People are being condemned for their ideas and the things that they say.
Exactly.
Books are being burned, it's crazy.
Yeah, and it's completely backwards. And people, it's so scary that people don't see this, and that they don't like. It seems like no one has read Orwell anymore. Like, and like, it used to be the other way around. I mean, I remember, like, it wasn't that long ago that the fight was the opposite. Like, we have to fight racism, which meant we have to not care about race, because that's what racism is: caring about race. So in my mind, it's just so depressing to see people focus on the superficial all the time. Everything but people's thoughts and opinions. They don't matter. It's just the superficial traits, and it's just sad. I mean, I don't care. I think some of the anonymous Twitter handles are some of the best Twitter handles, and I don't care who sits behind the handle. I care about the ideas. I have no. If it's a like a muscular blonde-haired white guy with swastikas tattooed all over his body, or like a pitch black Muslim lady with lesbian tendencies, doesn't matter at all to me. I don't care about the superficial. I care about what people think.
Yeah. And like, I care about what people do. What's their behavior? Like, it's fine to, like, you can hold the craziest opinions you want. Like, you can hold something that's completely opposite to my view. You can be the biggest racist bigot thing in the world. But if you don't act on them, then I don't, I'm not going to try to change your mind.
Exactly. Our opinions is the wrong word. Like, people's ideas matter. Ideas, not people's ideas. Ideas matter. Period.
Right.
Black swans matter.
Yeah. And actually, this conversation and what happened at Evergreen and what's happening everywhere with the stifling of speech and different ideas, and the cancel culture. There's a line here in your book that says, we're not immune to barbarism until we're truly self-sovereign. And so we touched on the barbarism part, but I'm wondering if you could elaborate on the relationship between self-sovereignty and that kind of barbaric behavior we're seeing all over the place.
this ties into what I said before about what's taking up my
oh, good.
right now.
I'm glad we didn't forget that.
Yeah, because and I recently wrote an article about this for this lovely magazine.
Citadel 21, baby.
Yeah, and that is in a society, and we're here now. By the way, all of this is possible, and not only possible, but it's happening in a society when everyone on Earth can keep any amount of wealth in their heads without anyone else even knowing if it's there or not. Cross any border, do whatever they like with it. Everyone can memorize 24 words. It's not that hard. It's quite hard, but everyone can. Anyway, the whole concept of information being literally valuable as opposed to metaphorically valuable. I mean, information has always been valuable to people, but with Bitcoin, the information is the scarce asset. It not only represents the scarce assets, it is the valuable thing. It is the asset. And that changes everything, every concept. But like, we have to rethink ownership completely with this thing, because it's such a different beast, and you can't really own stuff collectively anymore. Like, of course, you can have multi-sig solutions, but and stuff like that, but that's the limit to it. Like, I have a hard time, like I say in the book as well, I have a hard time figuring out how a nation state or a corporation can truly hold Bitcoin. And when I hear news about this, like, what's it called, MicroStrategy, this firm that bought 21,000 Bitcoins or whatever, who owns the private keys? They have a custodial service of some kind, I guess, but there's still a guy with the keys somewhere, you know. And I think these things, slowly over time, there will be harder and harder to like, and there will be so many Bitcoins lost in big vaults of hardware wallets, and like, when information is literally valuable, it turns everything on its head. Because when you can't know how much a person is worth, or you can't take the money from him or her, you can't really use force to you can't steal from them by being violent, not in a meaningful way anyway. Mm-hmm. That means that you have to provide something of value for your fellow man in order to enrich yourself from them. Like, so it's the most peaceful revolution there ever was. And like, it gives us a tool to try the ideas of guys like Mises and Rothbard, and like a non-aggression principle, libertarian, like anarcho-capitalist. I know those words ring differently to different people, but the base, at the base layer of all those philosophies, is like a non-violence principle, that you shouldn't be violent to other people.
Yeah.
And when you can't extract value from people by being violent to them, when you have more to gain from being their friends, like, if I befriend a guy with $10 million in Bitcoin in his head, it's better for me to befriend that guy than to shoot him in the head and try to get, because then they would be impossible to extract from the skull. You know?
Yeah.
Are you following me?
100%. And you know, this again is one of the things that the sovereign individual touches on when it says it's changing the logic of violence. And so we should expect to see less violence enacted in society, because that which is the object of theft, that which is the focus of theft and the accompanying violence, is less easily confiscated from people via violence, and that exactly changes the dynamic. And
we've already seen this without Bitcoin. We've already seen this transitioning into an internet economy. I mean, violent conflict is on a decline. Of course, we have the wars in Syria and everything, the horrible stuff happening here and there. But on the whole, for the last 50 years, we're living in peace times like never before. And I think this is there's a very strong connection to information being valuable rather than stuff.
Yeah.
That's behind this.
It's very interesting. And of course, it's probably prudent for people to have a backup of their seed somewhere other than their own mind. Now, in exceptional circumstances, the fact that that's available is wonderful, but perhaps you don't want to rely so much on that.
Yeah.
But it's just it's a bit of a mind bender to think that the fact that that's even possible means the internal concentration of tradable liquid value of potentially infinite magnitude. Because your seed could unlock whatever amount of market value on the network. And so just think about that for a second. Previously, our ideas and our creativity were like potential value that we had to enact in the world or through certain infrastructure in order to realize and have value accrue to it as a result of being externalized. But now we have this market, highly liquid, concentrated form of globally accepted value that we can store in the ether of our minds, of our consciousness. I mean, it truly is mind-blowing. Crazy thing.
It's truly mind-blowing. And the first time you like send Bitcoin from one paper wallet to another, you can feel the magic in this. You can say like this paper was worth a lot just a second ago, and now it's worth nothing. And I beamed the value from that one to that one. It's simply magic. And like when I say like seed phrases in your head, I don't mean that literally. It's just for the sake of abstract argument. Like information is just as valuable if you just know the location of your hardware wallet or whatever. Like so it's the point is that we have to rethink ownership, because it's not tied to size. For instance, if you have gold, if you have a vault of gold, that takes up a lot of space and it's easily confiscatable because it's a huge pile. With a Bitcoin hardware, a USB drive that can contain whatever amount, small or big, like without changing the size of the actual object. The point is that when information can be that valuable, it just changes everything. Yeah. And I think we're so like we haven't even started yet. This is people think they're late into Bitcoin. Can you imagine that? I mean, we haven't even like people. They don't even get that this is something to even think about. It's so mind bending. Did you see the tweet from Hodlonaut that I retweeted? Because he just
when?
By the way, I think it was this morning or maybe yesterday. He tweeted like, imagine something that on the internet that can't be copyable. So I just highlighted that and copied it and retweeted it with the same message. Mm-hmm. And that became sort of a thing. So people started to retweet it and copy the thing, because it really, if you know how easy it is to copy something on the internet, you can start to see how much of an achievement absolute digital scarcity really is. A finite thing in the digital space. It's just mind-blowing, and I can't stop thinking about it.
No, I think we all have the mind virus, mate. But it's as if we're cavemen and we just discovered fire, and we still have like spaceships to build, and people are thinking it's late. But just to circle back, you put a kind of capstone on what you were saying about ownership, because this is a line from the book as well that I underline is, and I harp on this quite often in podcasts and on Twitter, and I've come to the realization through being involved in Bitcoin that you don't have rights, you have permissions. The only thing you own is that which you can successfully defend. And in the book,
this is very important. A government can never give you a right. They can just give you permission. They have taken all your rights and they're given you permission. Free trade agreement is an oxymoron. Free trade should be everywhere. Yeah.
The book, you say, ask yourself what ownership really is and which, if any, of your possessions that are truly yours. And I think the same principle applies, because if you can defend something against whatever, government or other attackers, then yes, you can claim ownership of that. But if you can't, then it's a temporary permission granted to you by someone who can overcome your defenses.
Yeah. I remember one of my first, like maybe my 4th year in school, I had a mid-school teacher who told us about money and that they aren't really ours. We're just borrowing them from the government. And he truly believed that this, it was in his DNA. I hate the word, but like he didn't view money as something that he owned, and he was totally fine with the idea that he was ruled by another entity, and that we were just borrowing stuff from the government, and that's how societies worked and were supposed to work. And I mean, even then it started to get my brain going, you know, like how can this be so? How can an entity have this much power?
Well, you say this in the book: when a person has nothing to lose from bad decision making, bad decisions will be made. And that's characteristic of government in general, because they have the money printer, right? And that kind of makes them immune from bad decisions. But you know, you touch on an interesting point, and it's after you get involved in Bitcoin and the further you go down the rabbit hole and the more of these conversations and contemplations you have, it's fun sometimes to look back on who you were like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever, because you can start to see the thread that, or the threads that kind of made you primed for getting Bitcoin and being interested in following down that rabbit hole. Whereas before you might have, you know, they were kind of disparate, but now it kind of, Bitcoin has focused a lot of these underlying curiosities or philosophies, and it's brought it to amazing synthesis that you can behold and use and engage in and leverage.
And it's so excellent. Like I said before, it made people like us connect, and it's such a beautiful thing, because to see that there are other people that think third thoughts about stuff and not only second thoughts.
Yeah.
Like I loved your conversation with Reed Womack, by the way, about the alien kind thing. You saw I wrote an article right after. I couldn't help myself. And I noticed, like, you can tell that he's not been in this space for that long. But not to talk down on the guy, because I love the guy, and he helped me up with the book, and he's it seems like a super dude. But there are some tells that he needs to fall down the rabbit hole and stay there for a while longer. It's not.
I know what you're saying. Look, I mean, there's so much to consider in the rabbit hole that if you only got here like less than a year ago, it's impossible to have properly contemplated everything, right?
I sort of envy that position though, because like tumbling down the rabbit hole has been such an amazing journey, and I never had a mind virus like this, like making me think so much about so many different things.
I totally agree. But right before we started this podcast, I was just thinking to myself, I was looking over some of the underlines that I made in your book. And even though, like, I know what you're saying, like, it'd be fun to be back at the beginning, but I still feel like I'm about to jump out of my skin every day with excitement about, you know, what I'm learning and what this means, and, you know, new lines of thinking that were inspired in me from different authors and writers in the space. Like, it's just as exciting now as it ever was, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, for me too. There's always something new to think about. And there's like, when I'm jogging sometimes, I get a new thought in my head, and I just can't stop thinking about a single thing that just gets stuck. This last time was alien coin, which I found was a really, really wonderful abstract thought experiment. And I still can't really wrap my head around it, because like the whole concept is basically, if an alien race came here and they had a better Bitcoin, which had a longer proof of work chain, how would we interact with them, and would we adopt their coin?
Mhm.
But there's so much to that. First of all, the odds of that happening. I mean, it's easier to just guess the private key of a person's Bitcoin address than the odds of finding someone's Bitcoin by just guessing is probably higher than an alien race having
Who
a longer
knows?
blockchain.
Who knows?
Yeah. Anyway, now we won't fall down that rabbit hole. I'm done thinking about, and I'm not entirely sure of the answer. So
Yeah.
I don't. It's a funny thought experiment.
Yeah.
But-
One of the, obviously the title of the book is Independence Reimagined. And one of the lines that sticks out as kind of fundamental to the thesis of the book is, it has always been and still is about you versus those that wish to control you. And, you know,
Yeah.
we've obviously touched on this theme in the course of this conversation, and it's wrapped up in freedom and a lot of the things we talk about and reducing dependencies on a variety of mechanisms in society. What, you just elaborate on that for me, because it is kind of the core thesis of the book.
Yeah, I didn't hold back, did I? No, it felt like you said before, this book was more of a stream of consciousness thing, and I really didn't. I sort of censored myself in sovereignty, I think. But
Not as
back
much
to
your
question.
personality came through. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. This is more like, hang on, follow this thought thread and see where it leads. Like,
Right.
if you take it to its extreme, where does it lead you? And like, it's about you and those versus those who wish to control you. Like, independence is, what is independence, and what entity apart from a person can really be independent? Can you really be independent in a society where you're forced to interact with other people in any way? Or like the individual is the ultimate minority group, and but therefore the rights of the individual is the most precious thing, and the thing we should focus on if we ever want to have a society worth living in. Like, the rights of the individual are the only things that matter.
Yeah.
And to understand that truly, you need to realize that a government can never give you anything. It can just take stuff away. Right. Well, it can give you a coupon. Here's your COVID coupon. But that's a short-term thing, and it will keep you shackled and keep you dependent on them. And you will never be free in a mindset that accepts that.
Yeah.
That accepts your overlord. So go ahead, bite the bloody hand that feeds you. It's there's meat in there.
But you know why Bitcoin, one of the reasons why Bitcoin excites me so much is because I've always had the mindset that you just articulated, right? I didn't want to have, I wanted to reduce to the extent possible my dependencies. That means dependencies with debtors. That means dependencies of, supporting myself, all that kind of stuff. And of course, it's hard if you're living in an urban environment. For example, like, I've always wanted, even as a young kid before Bitcoin, to kind of live in the forest, off the grid, my own energy, like my own food, that kind of stuff, right? And I know a lot of Bitcoiners kind of resonate with that now.
Well,
but then I spent 10 years living in an urban jungle in Shanghai. Right. So like it's the most dependent. You're dependent on the subway and the lights and the heat and
but they're two different things though. Did you do that by your own free will, or were you forced to do it?
To move to live there?
Yeah. Most of these decisions that you made, like living in Shanghai,
it was my choice.
Yeah, and living in Shanghai probably enabled you to do the other stuff, right? Because you made money there, or something like that. I don't know your story, but
it's a trade-off, right?
It's a trade-off. Yeah, and of course, and I'm not trying to deny that will always exist. You will always have to make choices because everything in life is limited, and there's always a trade-off. And but a freedom seeker seeks to have a life that is that is his own.
Right.
Like,
Right.
if you have an urge to decide your own fate, or is that the correct way of putting it? I don't know.
Sure.
Like, and that's what matters. And mind you, that the route there might not be to accumulate as much money as possible. That is probably not it. People who do that are usually shackled to their possessions. So their possessions rule them.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather said something about that like a phrase that got stuck through the generations about what you can. What's the translation of the that which you can admit to yourself that you don't really need, you own that thing. If you can admit to yourself that you don't really need a thing,
Mm-hmm.
you own that thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if a motorcycle, for instance, I don't really need a motorcycle, therefore I own a motorcycle. I own it because I decide.
Right. It
A
doesn't own me.
motorcycle does not decide over me. I decide over it.
Yeah.
And that is what ownership is. And this goes back to the thing about how we have to rethink ownership when information is literally valuable. And there are so many other rabbit holes that open themselves up here, aren't there? like the whole thing.
So well, I want some of those rabbit holes, but all I was saying with that example of Shanghai, I agree. Like your ability to choose is the indicator of freedom.
Choice is ownership, right? Yeah.
All I meant was that, so that kind of ethos was in me prior to Bitcoin, and I would sometimes get into, debates with friends and stuff like this should be available to everybody, and then everyone is free to make their own choices. But what excites me about Bitcoin so much is that I don't think like we're going to get what Bitcoin allows for. Like it's going to impose its economic truth and its social impact, regardless of who wins a debate about what it is or isn't, or how to use it.
That's the beauty of it.
That's the beauty of it. Exactly. Yeah. So we're kind of at the mercy of what Bitcoin permits and what it prohibits now, and we'll see how that plays out. But I think it's going to be a very positive change, to say the least.
Yeah. And it might be. I heard Seyfedin say this just today, I think, on Swan Signal. He believes that it might actually make the transition more peaceful than whatever would have happened without Bitcoin. And like, I've been thinking about that a lot. Will there be a violent transition into a Bitcoin economy in the world, or will it be peaceful? And it's very hard to tell. It's like everything with the future, it's hard to predict. But in a way, it's hard to see how Bitcoin could make things more violent. I mean, it is a tool for making violence more pointless. So while it might be violent and we might experience the transition into hyper Bitcoinization, while it might be violent, I think it still will be less violent than what would have happened if we didn't have this thing. That would have been even worse. So that's the thing. Even if we're in for dark times now for 100 years, we don't really know that. But if that is, then I believe we have a better chance of getting out on the other side, less scarred than if we didn't have Bitcoin. So regardless, this is the trench I'm willing to die in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, we've seen pitchfork revolutions before, and they're usually violent. And the problem is that they usually just reset the same old system, just with a different group of people.
Same as the old boss.
Right. So you're still in this virtuous cycle. Whereas this I don't know how it's going to play out either, but I feel like this may stop that virtuous cycle, or at least change it dramatically. We can't know how things will evolve and change in the future, but you know, I agree. Of course, we're all hopeful for a transition that is smooth and minimally destructive. But it's really difficult to imagine the existing system unwinding itself without some chaos, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's really, yeah. But like I said, everything that has to do with big changes in the future, it's hard to imagine what they will actually be like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a question for you, John. How do you think this book compares to the first one, to Sovereignty?
Well, like I said, I think Sovereignty was more focused and structured, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it kind of dug in more deeply to the concepts that it attempted to cover. Where I took this one as like Knut, like I said, not stream of consciousness, but more on that bent, right? Where you're just kind of like you're synthesizing what's going on in the world today and what Bitcoin means to you, and you're just kind of like touching briefly on each one of them.
What's going on in my head?
Yeah, well, it's like a short book, right? It's 100 pages.
Yeah.
And you like each one of the chapters in this book could be its own like 300-page book, right? These are big themes you're dealing with, as we discussed a little bit on this conversation.
I think it's exactly the same length as Sovereignty.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the same number of pages, like 105 or 106.
Okay. I read Sovereignty.
That's all by chance.
I read Sovereignty whenever it came out. So was that 2 years ago or less?
No, 1.5 years. No, yeah, when? No, the thing is, I think no one heard of it. Ever heard of it till like September, October last year, when I brought a bunch of them to Riga.
Right.
I mean, I released it in like June.
Yeah. Well, so I can't remember exactly, but I just felt that one was more structured, and this one you were just like, fuck it, I'm gonna touch on like a bunch of the things that I wanted to touch on, and just, you know, not go into too great a depth, but make my point, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Knut,
that's all true. Yeah.
And actually, we should just give a shout out. Can you talk about the art that's on the back of the book, or the cover?
And like I said, before I forget, another shout out to Reed Womack, who helped me with this. And on the back side of the book, there's also a guy that I forget to mention from time to time. That's a meme by Swede Toshi. So sweet guy making meme pictures out of semi-famous Bitcoin people.
But the art is like a mechanical. Well, how would you describe it? It's like
the art is one of. Oh, did you fold that many pages? Like, that's so cool. Anyway, the art is simply spectacular. It's a guy called Fractal Encrypt, and it depicts a statue called the Bitcoin full node statue.
That's right, yeah.
Which he sold for a whole Bitcoin. He 3D prints those things, and he's an artist in Florida. I believe he lives in Florida. But the thing is, I saw it on Twitter. There was an like art exhibition in Miami where I saw that thing, and they were just filming it, and all these numbers and all this great artwork on it. I was just floored by it, because
it's a functioning mechanical node, right?
Yeah, it's not. It's a prototype in this state, so it's not functioning yet. But I guess his plan is to like have little LED screens everywhere and have it fully functional and like ticking like a clock and everything. And it's such a great piece. And then when he filmed it, I saw the words "sovereignty through mathematics" engraved in one of those circles. If you see the backside of the book there, on the top of it, it says "sovereignty through mathematics." And it says "virus in numeris" and all these other phrases like. But there's, it's in the upper right corner somewhere, I think, or the upper, close close to the edge.
It's a bit hard to make it. Oh, there it is. Yeah, it's
There
half
it
of
is. You see
half
it?
of it is there. Yeah.
Yeah.
The sovereignty through okay, mathematics.
Yeah. So it goes from the back to the front. But when I saw that, it's like, oh, isn't that funny? He like found the same phrase as I did.
Mhm.
So I tweeted at him like, oh, that's the title of my book. Have you seen this? Like, maybe there's a connection here somewhere. And it turns out that he listened to my book while he listened to Guy Swan read it while making the statue, while designing the artwork. So I was really, my jaw was on the floor there, like, oh, I'm a part of that piece. Like, that's the coolest thing I ever seen. So I contacted the guy, a really nice guy. He has much better OPSEC than any one of us. But anyway, and I asked him if he would like to design the artwork for my new book. And then when the book was, and he agreed to do that and blah, blah, blah. And I don't usually do these things, but okay, for you, okay. And when I was done with the book, I thought like, why should I bother this guy more and like sit here and wait for a new art? I have the perfect cover art for the book already. I'll just ask him if I can use the picture of the full note and put it on the cover. And he agreed to that. And I got a more high-res version of the picture and just put it on there because I think it's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's a super cool project.
Yes.
Super cool.
And Hodlonot and Daniel Prince also helped me with the book.
I saw Daniel Prince, the co-host of the Once Bitten podcast.
Yeah,
a secondary host, you would call it, kind of the Sue host, if you will.
Yeah. the boomer part of hosting.
Yeah. The afterthought host of the Once Bitten podcast did the the forward and the afterward, right? Or no, the after.
Hodlonot wrote the forward.
Right.
So the book begins with the sentence, "Being a space cat, I have a rather independent mind."
That's right.
Which is I couldn't have come up with a better sentence to start the book with.
Of course, I'm just kidding about Princey. I love him and the podcast and Lauren.
Yeah. Shout out to Lauren as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
the best podcast host ever, Lauren.
Yeah, your future is bright for that one.
Yeah. And another one of the greats, of course, Guy Swan, helped me out not only with turning it into an audiobook in a record short time, but also with proofreading and editing it.
Guys,
I really appreciate all the help. Like, I literally couldn't have done it without the help from the community, and I really love this collaborative spirit that's here, and it's so. There's really nothing to it. Just people help each other. Like, yeah, and I'd like to help others as well. Of course, I love these little projects all over Bitcoin Twitter.
It's phenomenal, man. I sometimes get pushback when I use the term community because I think some people think that it means that everyone has to think the same and act the same all the time, which obviously is not the case at all. But the fact of the matter is that I have connected with so many great people in this space and connected with them privately and have built relationships, and everyone that I've connected with is just, as good as gold or as good as Bitcoin. And it's a wonderful thing to be a part of.
It truly is. And like, I listen to your pod, like, every now and then. There's an ocean of podcast episodes.
I know.
And you try to listen to as much as you can, but sometimes you feel like listening to an audiobook, and like sometimes you have to. And I have like 2 hours per day, Monday to Friday, where I can really listen to something, and that's commuting from and to work. So 2 hours a day, 10 hours a week, something like that, I can devote to listening to podcasts. And sometimes I devote another hour or two, and I just fall into a rabbit hole. And sometimes the conversations are so good that I have to start writing something, like with the Reed Womack thing there, or and it's so good. Some of the stuff, like, did you hear that guy, the German guy, in the beginning of the Value of Bitcoin conference, talking about how you could view Bitcoin as a new element?
No.
And he made connections to chemistry, and like we've discovered a new element, and that the altcoins or the shit coins, they were unstable isotopes of this new element. Like it was such a beautiful way of framing it. So I
Remember
was
his name?
floored by it. Oh yeah, we need to make a shout out here because that was just too good. Let's see. That's a YouTube channel. Oh, let's see here. Oh, sorry, this will take a while.
Say, go to the value of Bitcoin.
Yeah. I'm so embarrassed for not remembering his name. So bad. Yeah, where is it? No, I can't spend this conversation searching for something. It's just weird.
I'll put it in the description of the video. You send it to me later, and I'll put it in the description.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Knut, it's always fun talking, man. Have we not covered anything you wanted to cover? Or do you have any last words to say before we shut this down?
Oh, it's so sad we had to shut it down. But anyway, I can ramble on for ages. But
hey man, like, if you got more to get off your chest, go for it.
Not that we can fit into a single pod episode. I have I feel I haven't discussed financial atheism as much as I would have liked to. Like that's also the provocateur in me wants to like battle all these conservative Americans about how you can view Bitcoin as financial atheism.
I have to ask you now, what the fuck you mean by that? I don't even know what you mean.
Like,
give me the summary.
The summary is like the burden of proof is on the one making the claim. That's how I view religions, and I view nation states as religious entities, like organized religions. So they're making claims about this is how it works, this is how the world works, this is what you should believe in, and religions have a way of framing, like organized religions have a way of framing things like this is God, it's an entity that exists, either it's one God or it's many gods, or like they all have different, there's like 5,000 different religions, and they all have different narratives for explaining how the world works, and they're all wrong basically, and they all base their theories on absolutely nothing at all which is verifiable. And therefore I choose not to believe in anything until I'm convinced that what I'm hearing is truthful. And I'm usually not convinced until I can do the verification myself. So that's how I view money as well, because in my opinion, fiat monetary systems are just they're just religions. They tell you this thing is valuable because it's sort of scarce, or like it's we don't worry about it, we'll take care of the monetary policy. So there's no way for you to verify the total supply, or even the total supply on the market of a fiat currency, or even of gold. It's just other people telling you that they're valuable. And with Bitcoin, you can by running your own node, and even using just calculating by hand, you can verify that that they are actually scarce, and that you can't counterfeit them, and you can't make new Bitcoins. You can verify all this, that this is true, and you don't really have to trust in third parties. Not to the same extent as you have to in other systems anyway. And therefore you can see Bitcoin as monetary atheism. Like the rejection of faith-based value claims or faith-based scarcity claims. So if you reject all the claims that are made without evidence about something's scarcity, how finite a monetary asset is, then you're basically an atheist, because you reject notions that you don't believe in, and you reject narratives that don't make sense to you. And that's how I view Bitcoin. It's not, and this is why I'm having like sort of a friendly fight with the guys that call it Bitcoin a religion, and Friar Haas and Gigi and those guys. They like the Book of Satoshi, and they try to frame it as this is as powerful as a religion. But me, coming from like being a huge fan of especially Christopher Hitchens, but also Dawkins and Harris and Dennett and the New Atheist movement, those books really put the finger on what I thought about religion, especially organized religion, and how dangerous dogmatic thinking is. Like Bitcoin for me is like the next step in that. I've been an atheist for a long time, but I still believed that democracy was a good idea until very recently, after I discovered Bitcoin, and like that even this can be questioned. The nation state, how is this not a religious entity also, and how is this not a cult? And there's a chapter in the book, one of the last chapters, comparing the Wikipedia definition of a cult and the nation state. What really separates how is a nation state not a cult? And I couldn't really spot a difference between a cult and a nation state. And I believe nation states are cults and organized religions are cults. And I don't believe that I was created by anyone. I believe that we're here by pure chance, pure luck, and the odds are totally against that, except for you do exist. So if it didn't play out this way, you wouldn't have been able to observe it anyway. So in that sense, it doesn't matter if the odds are against that happening, because you wouldn't be alive to tell that the odds were stacked against you if it didn't play out the way it did. So like I refuse to believe stuff that I can't really verify for myself. That's my basic outlook on life. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. And you were right in saying that this is a very big rabbit hole that we could spend a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. And is it far-fetched?
No, I don't think it's far-fetched. I think there is an interesting discussion, and this gets into what the role of religion was. If you remove the kind of the central godlike figure, and you talk about the role of religion in attempting to compel, but because there was no mechanism to compel, and you could even argue that perhaps the God figure was the best attempt at compelling behavior when no true enforcement mechanism existed to to inspire behavior that would benefit the individual and the collective in the best kind of balance between the two. Hold on. Maybe we can make the case that religion partially that dynamic existed in religion. And then it would be interesting to take that understanding and move it over to Bitcoin and say, well, Bitcoin is a mechanism that prohibits or permits certain behaviors, and that it can enforce the permission or prohibition of certain behaviors. And is there not a similar dynamic at play there in how that molds behavior? And is that kind of the act of creation from moment to moment?
Like I said, this is a whole different rabbit hole. But like what you said about religions empowering the individual, I have a slightly different.
No, hold on. Let me clarify. The religious doctrine, I think one of its roles was in creating an ideal for how individuals could behave or act. And that ideal perhaps was a synthesis of both how an individual could have a meaningful and beneficial life, and balance with that of the collective.
Yeah, but it's dark. I can agree to that to some extent, but I have a much darker view of what that meant. Because if you look back at early civilizations, whenever they invent ceremonial burial, their borders expand. And why is that? Because when you invent ceremonial burial, that's when you can fool 18-year-olds that there's a life after this one. And if there's an afterlife, if you can fool them that there's an afterlife and that they will get like 13 virgins or whatever, or a porch when when they get to this afterlife, then you can fool them into killing the neighboring village. And this is why when you look at like prehistoric civilizations, and the predominant cause of death in males is a blow to the head, like we were really violent, and we killed all the Neanderthals, and we killed all the Cro-Magnons, and like human history is filled with conflict. And you can't really make a human being kill another human being if you don't have a story powerful enough to fool them with. And this is what the sociopaths and the psychopaths on top of our societies have been doing to us across the ages, and are still doing to this day. Yeah. It's getting harder and harder for them because everyone has a phone, a camera in their smartphone, so they can't really torture people and make people do despicable things as easily as they could. Yeah. And like for the 20th century, they had to invent other mechanisms of fooling people, like central banking, which played a huge role in World War I and World War II. And the entire military industry in Germany was financed by people who believed that their Deutschmarks were worth what the figure on the piece of paper said they were worth, when they were in reality just printed out of thin air, just like right now. Yeah. And this is how I think nations and religions tie together. They are all systems for controlling populations, controlling vast amounts of people, and they have made us able. We've been, the human race has been able to wipe out the competition and conquer every continent because of these stories. And this is also in the book, by the way, in the first chapters, about with the intersubjective reality of a shared delusion. We have so many of those, and I believe to truly reimagine independence and to be independent within your head, and to have an independent mind, and to really get out of this, you need to see that everything that is man-made is an illusion. Everything in society that is man-made is an illusion. And this goes just as much for religion as it does for nations, or whatever they try to put in your head there. But it's not true. And you can make your own reality. You don't have to follow someone else's. But I'm rambling on here.
Well, so just to respond and not get into a big thing, what I totally agree that, for example, religious institutions have been co-opted and corrupted and used to do a great number of things.
Wait, just cut in there. I don't believe they were ever corrupted. I believe they've been corrupted.
That's what I'm about to say. You gotta let me finish.
Okay. yeah.
So I believe, as you say, much negative things have been done in their name. Let's put it that way.
No. They were designed to fool
I'm trying
you
to get to my point. I'm trying to get to my point. So so let me finish here. So I think much has been done in their name, but I am receptive to and interested in the intellectual inquiry around kind of your Jordan Peterson's sort of view on religion, where he looks at did these ideas emerge out of some kind of evolutionary dynamic happening in human consciousness, and is there some deeper seated root, like were these ideas literally co-evolved with human beings, and then of course after that, like were they used to construct an ideal of some kind, and for the individual? And did they kind of bring order through chaos, to use his terms?
Yeah.
And was that then used for all the nefarious things in humanity? But we can't also forget the many good things that, and I'm not religious, just so you know, but many good things that have come from religious doctrines, if not their dogmatic application, but there's been positives too. So
Yes.
and so my original comparison there was moving it to Bitcoin, in understanding how Bitcoin is a mechanism for allowing or disallowing, permitting or prohibiting certain behavior, certain forms of interaction between human beings. Is it first of all, that will inevitably shape us. The things that we engage with that allow for certain behaviors will shape us. And should we expect something that enforces behavior? Because my original assertion was that these kind of religious doctrines were for guiding behavior but had no enforcement mechanism. Will the enforcement of the behavior that Bitcoin allows or prohibits, is that the reason why we see quasi-religious fervor around Bitcoin?
Probably.
Take the floor, Knut.
All right. I would say that Bitcoin will probably succeed where religions failed in making people better people. Because instead of focusing on a narrative or a story, which we can all agree on, that like if we think there's a higher power, then maybe we will behave better against.
That's the enforcement mechanism.
Yeah. But I don't really believe that, because you can look at different methods, like South America. There's much more crime in South America than in Scandinavia, for instance. And we're not religious at all here, and everyone's religious in South America. And if you look at different areas across, there are many things like which you can point to. This is like, if you go to the most religious place on earth, Saudi Arabia, probably, and it's literally the last place on earth where I would want to live. That's or North Korea, which I also consider to be a religion. Anyway, I would say that Bitcoin will succeed in making people better people, because instead of focusing on being a good story, it plays on our incentives and how we interact with each other. And we can't benefit from Bitcoin if we're not peaceful and provide something of value to each other. And that's how it changes us. And of course, I can see how people liken this to a religious epiphany. But for me, it's more like the light bulb of, hang on, none of this is true. I don't have to follow orders. I can think for myself. Like the light bulb moment is a complete opposite to a religious experience for me. It's like, no, hang on, that was also a lie. Wait, but why? Like,
to access the kingdom of Bitcoin, you must follow the consensus rules.
Yeah, but not really.
I'm making a comparison to, if you want to access the kingdom of heaven, you have to follow whatever the
No. But the thing is, if you want access to the kingdom of Bitcoin, all you need to do is provide value to your fellow man and make sure that they pay you in Bitcoin. You don't have to follow the consensus rules unless you want to mine Bitcoin. That's a completely different thing. Like, you don't even have to follow.
I see what you're saying.
Running your own node, you don't have to follow any rules. You just have to make sure that your node is aware of what rules the miners need to follow.
Right. So you have to accept them. You have to accept those rules.
No, you have to,
because you're by using the tools to interact with the network, you're accepting those rules that you can't do anything other than what those rules dictate.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't use the word accepting. You're so in order to trust all these people with all these big servers and all these incentives to screw you over, you need some way of verifying that that they're not playing an unfair game, and that they're not trying to screw you over.
Right.
And that's what you're doing. If you want to call that giving in to rules, that's not how I view it.
Well, I mean, I would not give. I would say
following rules. I'm not following rules. I'm making sure that other people do.
You're accepting a certain rule set, right?
Yeah, of course I am, because I'm convinced that this rule set is the only shot at decentralization we have. And decentralization is the only shot we have. Is the only mechanism that can ever make a fixed supply cap of an asset work.
Yes, of course. That's a whole nother issue. The point is
a whole nother rabbit hole, and it's in the book.
The point is to interact with that particular network, this particular one, we're kind of implicitly agreeing to play by a certain set of rules, because if we don't, we can't access it, right?
No, and we're not playing by the rules. We're making sure that the ones that are trying to actually, that we're making sure that the gold rush people are playing by the rules. The miners are playing by the rules.
Right. We're accepting the limitations of whatever this thing that we're interacting with has. By using them, that's what we're doing, right?
Yeah, because otherwise there would be no point. But that's just like saying, that's like saying you're accepting. That's like saying, because you can figure out that 2 + 2 = 4, you're accepting the rules of mathematics. That's like, it's not accepting anything. It's just verifying that whatever those guys are doing has not been corrupted.
Right.
So I don't really view it as accepting rules.
Well, there's some interaction between what the rules dictate is possible in terms of behavior and how you engage with a system with those dictates, right?
Yeah. But of course,
that's what's happening.
Of course, disagreeing with the rules may also be the correct option from time to time. Like, if enough people do that, then Bitcoin will follow another path and do another. Like the user activated soft fork and the no 2x movement and all this. This was a testament to this. Like, all the miners wanted to do one thing and all the users wanted to do another thing. So we weren't accepting their rules. We were accepting, no, you can't cheat us. We're not accepting your rules. We're making sure that you follow our rules, or we'll just abandon ship and go somewhere else.
Right. So we upheld the rules that we wanted to play by.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we made sure that they weren't cheating with their pieces on the chessboard. That's the only thing. And if you want to call that accepting the rules, like if I play a game of chess with you, I don't want you to cheat.
Right. So we accept the rules of the game that we're both playing by, right?
Exactly.
Right.
And it's just like playing any other game. It's just like when we're using fiat money, we're completely unable to check that anyone is playing by any rules.
Right.
So that's the difference here. I know you already know all this, and you're just happy having this rant about it, right?
I'm pretty sure we're saying the exact same shit. We should have shut.
Yeah. Of course we are. It's a wonderful circle jerk, this community. Yeah.
Well, Knut, we'll have to break into this chestnut some other time and take it to its proper end. But for now, let's put a pin in it. Do you have anything you want to say as last words before we say goodbye?
Well, you find most of my Bitcoin stuff on Twitter. You find my books on Amazon, and I'm happy to say they're also available in, the first one is in German and Finnish at the moment, and the Italian translation is just about done.
Exciting.
Mir is doing the proofreading, and she's almost done with it. I'm very eager and can't wait for it to come out. And the second book is being translated to German. There was just a second edition of Sovereignty published in Germany. And I'm really happy about that, and that the books are doing so well, of course. And a huge thank you to everyone in this community, because I enjoy this ride so much and I love all of you. And I can't wait to meet you all in meat space and have a couple of beers and an overpriced steak dinner with you all. Like that's like my top of my list now when this whole insanity thing blows over.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Really
for that
want to
either.
see it. No.
I'm sure I speak for everybody when I say thank you for taking the time and the courage to express yourself and put out this great work. And it's always a pleasure to chat, man. I look forward to the next one already.
And the same to you, John. You have a way of pulling things out of people that is just superb. I love your stuff, man.
No, I very much appreciate it, man. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Yes, thank you for this. And sorry for rambling on for too long.
See ya.
Thank you.